It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Friday, March 28th, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that loves a win in the post John Tortorella era.
Sure, but there's still lots of questions.
Oh, yes.
You're Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, and thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. I've been podcasting about the Flyers, the NHL, and hockey for a decade. I'm here with prospect expert and Flyers credentialed reporter for 19 years, Russ Cohen. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $200 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. And to keep up with our latest episodes and Flyers news like we had today, you can find us at Locked On Flyers on all your favorite socials. And of course, here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are going to dig into the details of the win against Montreal, the Cam York benching, the almost hat trick from Matvei Michkov, and so much more. Plus, we are going to do a little twist on a Buffalo Sabres preview by looking at what their franchise situation is, comparing it to the Flyers and seeing what pitfalls we can avoid compared to the Sabres and their attempts at a rebuild. But we do have to mention a couple other little news items that kind of got lost in the sauce of all the John Tortorella news. And that is Jet Luchenko is now with the Lehigh Valley Phantoms. And we're going to talk more about that on our next Phantoms Tuesday next week, see how he did in his first couple of games. Think it's a good move, though.
Yeah, no, that's good. Let him play there, have the fun for the rest of the season, go on a playoff run.
Absolutely. We also had Ty Murchison, ELC. We'll talk more about him next week because it was kind of an unexpected contract to some degree. So
Yes.
we will get into that next week when we look at our prospects. But we did do a bonus episode on Thursday following the firing of John Tortorella. We've got a lot of good information in there with our initial reaction to the Flyers deciding to move on from him as head coach. And we talked a lot there about kind of what it meant in terms of the timing of it all and why they would do it with only 9 games left and what led up to it. And what we heard from Danny Briere later in the day on Thursday, I think pretty much aligned with what we said in terms of things starting to look weird after Four Nations, and then it kind of accelerated at the trade deadline. And the last couple of days, it's been like, they might do this sooner rather than later.
Yeah, things that we were talking about definitely were coming to fruition with the front office, and they kind of were just like, all right, all right, all right, you know what? Now this is enough. And they had just had enough. And that's, it sometimes gets to that point. And it did.
Yeah, I think, two of the bigger questions here are, was it the right move for the Flyers and why? What is the basis for the decision? And I think the answer to the first question is probably yes. But the second question, I don't know that we have an answer yet, even though we heard from Danny Briere, right?
Right. First question is, I think it's a definite yes. And I think based on a lot of comments that I saw post show was a yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, as far as, why, not a lot came out on that. So that's why, look, I mean, I just will say it as plain as this. That's why we do the job that we do, and we try and do it as diligently as we can so we can kind of like piece this together for everybody out there, because it's not very clear. If I just went off what the team said and we haven't said anything in the last 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks, it would be a lot harder for me to kind of figure it out in a day.
Right. And we had been saying, again, that there was just something missing from his coaching, from what he'd been saying, from the lack of creativity with the lineups, like no adjustments, all of that. There were these little clues that he was just kind of done and he was
Right.
over it in a lot of ways. But Danny Briere didn't really talk about any of that. He said that he felt at this time it was necessary to move in a different direction, but like, why?
Yeah,
You know?
I'm sure one of the things is something we harped on for a while, and I did research on, and that was Jacob Peltier and the fact that he had never played on the
Mhm.
fourth line, and they kept him on the fourth line for so long. And somehow tonight he had at least 2 assists, maybe more, because I didn't get to look at the final sheet, and that would never have happened if he kept playing the fourth line.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And he had made the adjustment, but it was
It took
probably
a long time.
too late on that front. Now, what Briere did say was that, while he wasn't going to get into specifics, they had some different opinions on different things. That he appreciated that Torts wasn't a yes man, that he did have his opinions and stuck to them, and that made it, a good complementary team, which is something he's said over the last 2 years many times. But that he wasn't ready to blame like the Flyers, say, defensive structural breakdowns on Torts either.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we didn't get enough on that, and I feel like I got justification on how much John had to do with player evaluations, and you should never let a coach have that much power with player evaluations. It's never a good thing. That's not their forte. Coaches have biases. We know John had biases, and that's something where I feel like they can't do that again with the next coach, no matter who it is.
Right. And, in terms of what it means for the rebuild and Danny Briere's plan, he did say that they are now in a new phase of the rebuild, that they've hit rock bottom for hopefully, I guess, and that, there's nowhere to go but up. But I mean, who's to say? But I do think that this had to happen in a lot of ways in order for them to move to a new phase, whether this is rock bottom or not.
Right. We don't know if it's rock bottom, and we really don't know if they have a great idea of the planned direction. Because, like we said, it's definitely changed. And even a few weeks ago, Danny had acquiesced that it has changed. And that's the thing. I still don't feel like it's a 100% straight line as to what's next in the rebuild. I think that's something where I feel like they should have a little better handle on, but right now they don't. And even the coaching list, they don't have that yet.
Right, exactly. That I think that that's the missing link here, is that obviously now they have to adjust the plan again in some significant way. And I do understand maybe not having a list of names at this moment, but to not have a list of qualities right now when you make the decision to fire your existing coach, that's a problem to me.
Right.
I think
Yeah.
that's the difference. I'm okay with not having names. I'm not okay with not even having like a basic 3 bullet point job description in your head.
Right. And honestly, after listening to Bradshaw post game, I think it's pretty clear that while he would love to be an NHL coach, he's not expecting that. And I don't think anybody in the media is expecting him to get the job. And so I think he's going to really enjoy the games that he's getting here. And I don't think he's expecting to get the next job, honestly.
No, and he said it was tough for him, which is certainly understandable because he and Torts have been friends for years and years,
Correct.
and the situation must be awkward.
Yes.
And Bradshaw said something along the lines of, "I left him a voicemail, but I haven't talked to him."
I
And
think that's
I can't,
funny. I actually
I
think
can't
that's,
even imagine what that conversation will be
I
like.
know. I just think it's funny that Torts didn't call him back yet. It's just, that seems typical for him. Like he's got to cool down.
Well, I would too. So I certainly understand that he's got to take a day at least before he gets back to people. But
Yeah.
I do think that one of the things that he and Danny Briere emphasized was in terms of the team having to stick together and play for each other, and I certainly think they did that to a large degree against Montreal.
Yeah, there's no question they did that. I had a couple tweets where I don't think Montreal was ready for Matvei Michkov, and I don't think they
Mm-mm.
took into account what this game was going to be like with the Flyers being like that. It was obvious they were going to give that kind of effort. Any team does after their coach is fired, and they were not up for the challenge for a lot of that game.
They were not. It was very clear. And we're going to talk more about that game coming up next.
March Madness is here, and FanDuel's giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on. I would go with Duke. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly, no waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long.
All right. On Monday's show, we will, of course, recap the Sabres game, and we're going to talk Flyers versus Preds, more on the fallout from the Tortorella firing and our nemesis of the week. So Monday's going to be jam-packed. Flyers versus Montreal. This was just a bizarro game in the most fun way possible. Now, I think it would have, the cherry on top would have been the Matvei Michkov hat trick for sure. That post is going to haunt me for days. I can't imagine what it's going to do to him, but he looked like he was having a good time out there.
Yeah, that was, definitely he was having more fun. The thing I had stressed about maybe 3 weeks ago is that he needed to have more fun. And I feel like while John eased up on him before he left, it wasn't enough easing up on him. And now I feel like it is. And so, yeah, he could get back in the Calder in a lot bigger way. He could finish the season feeling a lot better about it. So, all those things are good. The hat trick, yeah, he's still looking for one, but he's going to get a bunch in his career.
Yeah, I believe that 100%. And the other big thing in this game that again made it weird was the Cam York benching. And,
yeah,
so for him to take warmups and then sit on the bench the entire game, playing 0 minutes and not even holding a stick was just like one of the most awkward things I have ever seen watching hockey.
it was. Now you have to understand, like us in the media, we're like around the 10-minute mark. Where's Cam York? So Haley sits next to me, Haley Simon for Locked On Blues, and she's like, I see him there. I said, well, look really close now and see if you see his stick. She goes, no, there's no stick. And so, because we're not listening to the TV broadcast, so we found that out right before the end of the first period that he doesn't have his stick. He definitely didn't have his stick after that. And we were like, okay, now this is weird. And so I talked to a few people who know the rules inside and out. And because of other teams having cap circumvention in the past, you have to be able to feel the team, even if that person can't play. It's not like, hey, a guy leaves the game injured and you can't do anything about it. No. This is like you have to put your best effort in to feel the game. And the problem with that is the Flyers didn't have anybody for the roster spot, and they didn't call up anybody on an emergency basis. And it's like you do have to wonder why.
Well, they couldn't call anybody up on an emergency basis because nobody was hurt in order to justify that.
Oh, I guess that's fair. I don't know. I wonder if there's another thing where you can call up somebody on an emergency basis and who knows? I don't know that for sure.
I believe that if there's an official suspension, like from the league, so that person can't play, then you can have the emergency call up. But this was a team disciplinary issue, and that does not qualify for the emergency call up.
Okay, so that explains why maybe they didn't suspend him, because that's another question is why didn't they just suspend him? But okay.
Yeah, I really think that's what it was. And, Bradshaw said that it was just a disciplinary issue that he'll play on Saturday.
But that's really vague.
Elaborate.
Yeah. I mean, disciplinary could be so many things. And, I could speculate on 10 different things if I want. And I'm sure people are going to in the coming days.
I would not be surprised if there are memes going around already with pictures of Cam York with random quotes attributed to him that led to his supposed disciplinary action there. But I think going back to who actually did play in this game, in addition to Michkov, obviously Sean Couturier, I really think this was just such a good game for him as a leader and as a captain. Like you could tell he was setting the tone for the team.
No question. I mean, he definitely was doing all he could. He always does. But he did set the tone for sure, and definitely set it post-game with his comments. And so, yeah, that is what a leader looks like.
Yeah, I think so. And as the 5D core had to each play extra time, Travis Sanheim had over 30 minutes in this game.
That's
And
tough. Luckily,
yeah,
luckily it wasn't a
real tough.
back-to-back situation. Imagine that.
Oh, I know. But you know what? Again, he is their de facto number one defenseman, and that's what you do. And so, like, I think for him to have stepped up in that way, most of the time I would be mad he would have this much ice time. But this one game, I think it was honestly a good thing because you need to have leaders, on the front end and the back end.
Now, the thing that's the problem with the organization that preceded Danny and even Dan Hilferty and everybody else is just think about the breadth of coaches, the amount of coaches Travis Sanheim has had in his career. It's too many. Even he laughed about it. He was kind of like, yeah, I've been through a lot of them. He didn't say it exactly like that, but, he said
He
something
kind of
close.
did.
He did.
Yeah, he did. That it's always a surprise every time. But poor guy.
Yeah.
Anyway, there was that. The other interesting aspect of this game was, I think, the 5-forward power play.
Right.
Because, you tend to, at least from my perspective, this was a good win for them just for the emotional aspect of it. And I think
Right.
there was a lot of fun aspects to this game with the high scoring, and it was like the action was pretty, like the pace was pretty good. I personally don't want to nitpick. Now, the power play was also like pretty bad at times in this game,
Right.
but they did score. So I'm going to take that as a win.
Okay. I mean, today I'll give you a win. If I see the same old, I will nitpick again.
Sure. 100, that's fine. I'm okay with that. I just like this one time. I want to take it as a
Sure.
win, mostly because I think the passing was faster and crisper
Okay.
on that particular power play. And I really thought the puck support the Flyers had throughout this game was excellent. I just really feel like a lot of guys were skating to the open area to be there to pick up loose pucks, to back up, when there was a board battle and the puck
Yep.
squirted out. Like there was another Flyers player there more often than not, which I thought it just stood out to me. And I thought
Sure.
that was
No,
a
that's
good
an
thing.
improvement for that day, that game. I'm not going any further.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, we can't until the other games are played. The other thing that was great is Tyson Forster getting back on the board. That was very much
Yeah,
needed.
he needed that. Yeah, that's something where you hope it could fuel him because he's not had a great season. It's been okay, but it is sort of like a sophomorish slump and what you see with young
Mhm.
players. So yeah, Owen Tippett though, I'm pretty worried about that player.
Yeah, I think just because of the way the lines are right now, he's kind of an odd man out,
Yeah.
and it's a little difficult for him to find chemistry, I think, with Brian Paling and Jacob Peltier right now. Peltier, I think, played very well.
That was his best game as a Flyer, like under the
Yeah.
radar best game as the Flyer. Getting back to Tippett, there used to be a lot more effort to make plays on his own, and now he's just sort of abandoned that.
Yeah, that's a problem. I think that's absolutely a problem. And I think, as far as Sam Ersson in net goes, I thought he made some tremendous saves. I thought he was dialed for most of the game. I think there was definitely, I would say 1.5 of those goals were on him.
Yeah.
But I think that there was enough good in that game that I'm going to call it a good outing for him.
I'll go with that, but I wasn't in love with the outing, but okay, that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a great game. I'm saying
Right.
it was a good outing for him, and I think some of the saves he made, I think, are confidence building saves.
Okay.
That's kinda where I'm at there. I'll be interested to see who's in net on Saturday, and if the rotation changes at all,
Right.
and maybe if Kolosov gets in at all.
Right.
All big questions there. But I think considering everything that went on Thursday, I think that, the team put together as good a game as you're going to see from this group of hockey players. And, Montreal, like this was a very winnable game for Montreal, and they just did not rise to the challenge.
No, they didn't rise to the challenge. Actually, like I said before, they're kind of reminding me of the Flyers when last year they were in their stretch drive and then all of a sudden something started to fail. And it looks like that's what's happening with the Canadiens. So yeah, no matter what happens here, this has been a long day. Like, I need a nap soon.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. We are, of course, face the Buffalo Sabres on Saturday afternoon, and they've had a rough go of it for over a decade now, and we do not want the Flyers to fall into those same traps. We're going to talk about what they are and how the Flyers rebuild is comparing coming up next.
Daylight savings snuck up on us again, and if you're feeling that loss of an hour's sleep, 5-Hour Energy has your back. The extra sunshine means more time for fun, but sometimes you need a little boost to power through. Whether you're staying up late and watching the NCAA tournament, squeezing in a round of golf after work, or just trying to keep up with your busy day, 5-Hour Energy gives you that quick, refreshing pick-me-up whenever you need it. With longer days, I love getting outside for a hike or a long walk. Tropical Burst is my go-to for a quick boost. Head to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from, including watermelon, blue raspberry, and peach mango. You could even build your own 12-pack or 24-pack delivered right to your door. Need one now? Grab a 5-Hour Energy shot at your local grocery or convenience store. They're everywhere. Stock up today and stay energized.
With the upcoming game this weekend against the Buffalo Sabres and everything going on with the Flyers right now, I think, the Flyers do face the Sabres twice in the remainder of this season, and they could be a cautionary tale for the Flyers in their rebuild and changes they're making and decisions that they've made. And as we know, the Sabres' last playoff appearance was in 2010 to 2011. They lost to the Flyers in the first round there. They last won a playoff round in 2006, 2007, and their last Stanley Cup final appearance was in 1998-99. So it's been, let's say, a rough couple decades for Sabres fans here. And I think, there's a lot of lessons and, warning signs from what the Buffalo Sabres have been doing over the last, let's say, decade, that we want the Flyers to avoid, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's things that you could stay away from. I mean, no rebuild is perfect, but you don't want to be
Right.
rebuilding for 14 years. I get that. You
No.
can't always have the rebuild mentality. At some point, you have to do something to kind of forge ahead and change things. But I feel like when they got Lindy Ruff involved, it was just falling back on what they used to do when they were, when they were good. But that's too many years ago. Too much has changed, and I think that there's a danger in that.
Yeah, I think, Lindy Ruff did have a moderately successful coaching period with the Sabres, but it was so long ago, to your
Right,
point, that could he be the same? Now, one might say that about John Tortorella and having brought him in to coach the Flyers when maybe his better days were behind him
right.
as an NHL head coach. And so there's a little bit of a parallel there.
Yes.
Kevin Adams, the GM, has been there for 4 years, I believe now.
Yep.
And, he's kind of had a rough go of it, I would say, as GM. He's been in a difficult position, but some of the difficulty he's had is of his own doing in a lot of ways, right?
Sure. I mean, also a new GM at the time,
Yeah.
also kind of like handpicked by the owner.
Hmm.
That sometimes is a problem too. When a guy comes from the inside and is on the inside, sometimes you need someone from the outside, or if not, we've always said, bring in more people from the outside so you get that different view. So I think there's some of that. When he said that we don't have palm trees and we're just not a destination place. Well, they were a destination place when, like, Chris Drury was there with Danny Briere, and they were in the playoffs all the time and winning. So
Yep.
winning changes all that. Winning makes Buffalo seem better and makes all the everything, food taste better and the air better.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, there's some good wings in Buffalo.
Oh
We'll
no,
give
there's
him that.
great way. Buffalo's a really good food city, but this will
It is.
elevate
It
everything
is.
if you're winning. That's the point.
I know. I know. Yeah. And, obviously the biggest thing that has happened with the Sabres in recent years is losing Jack Eichel and being forced to trade him.
Yeah.
They did a whole entire strategy around tanking to try and get Connor McDavid. The lottery did not go their way. They wind up with Jack Eichel, who is a tremendous player
which is a
in his own
gift.
right. Yeah, I know. We would all be grateful to have Jack Eichel, hockey player, on our team, but they had a rift with him due to the surgery decision that Eichel wanted to make for himself that the team disagreed with and forced into a trade there. And it was a huge decision that was, based in not wanting to take a risk that set them back, I think, at least 5 years.
Oh, no question. I mean, again, it was like pretty much like, well, we'll trade you and then you're a new organization and you could decide what you want to do with your neck. But he knew what he wanted to do, and his mother's in the medical field, so they had a very good plan as to what they wanted, and the Sabres didn't agree with that. So they traded him. They found out that they made the wrong decision. They may not tell us that they made the wrong decision, but we could surmise they made the wrong decision.
It's very clear based on how Eichel has played with Vegas. I mean, and the success that Vegas had since then. I mean, come on. It's literally right there, carved into a trophy for all to see. But, I think that that's just one example of a lack of interest in taking any risk. They won't take risks with paying players to stay there to try and build something. Then they have to overpay for a guy like Jordan Greenway because he's one of a few players who will re-sign there, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, Jordan Greenway is an okay player. He's a big player. He could sometimes get to the net and score some goals. He's a good guy in the room. And yeah, they had to overpay him to keep him. And that's part of the problem there is it's not a destination. If you want to get a player, you most likely have to get a player on a trade with term. And that's usually the way. Now, Winnipeg's been operating that way the whole time, other than drafting and developing. And that's where they're superior to the Sabres, is on drafting and developing. So if you do that, you can get away with that other part, because Winnipeg's not a destination either. But last I looked, they're pretty good.
They are. And that's a big difference there. And so it's a combination of creating an environment that breeds success in terms of quality drafting and developing.
Right.
And then doing the things you need to do in order to entice your players to want to stick around and be a part of something. And the Sabres have not been able to do that because they show that year after year after year, they don't invest in the sum total of their team. And you see that by the trade deadline moves that they make year to year. I mean, this year, for example, sending Dylan Cousins off to the Senators, right?
Yeah, they felt like they had to do something. And so I think Dylan Cousins was due a new contract, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe if it's not next year, it's soon. And they probably felt like they didn't want to pay that. So they wanted to get the best value they could for him. And Josh Norris is a heck of a player when he's healthy. So far, he has not been healthy. And so, yeah, this is another one where you look at it and say, why?
Right. And, the Sabres are the only team that's below the Flyers right now in the Eastern Conference. And, but they still have 3 additional games to play over the Flyers. So the potential for them to earn a few points more than the Flyers is certainly there due to games remaining. But
yeah, the one thing I'll correct myself. So Cousins is in the midst of a long-term deal. I couldn't remember that, but it goes to 29-30. So clearly they weren't on board with what he was making based on the point production.
So, I think that Buffalo has just put themselves, again, based on where they are in the standings, and they put themselves again in a difficult position because they didn't do what they needed to win more to be a part of the playoff race, right? But also they're in a similar Flyers boat, or at least the Flyers of the last couple of years, in terms of where they end up in the draft order in order to be able to maybe take that quicker leap forward. And this has been their problem year after year after year after year.
Right. Now, this last little bit of the season, the Sabres have tried to make a charge to kind of like try and salvage whatever, and they may move ahead of the Flyers. And I think as much as, fans want to be as high in the draft as they can, and I get it, I also think optically for like the Flyers front office, it's not a great look after last year. And so I think that plays into this too, even though we could all agree that even if the Sabres win 5 of their last 7, it doesn't really mean they're going to be any better next year. But they're just trying to make themselves feel better. So, but these are the
Right.
things that, also fans, what they feel good or bad about matters. And right now, I heard some calls this morning from Flyers fans into Sirius XM, and a lot of them are not happy, even though they may want a high draft pick, but they're not seeing everything being carried out. And I think that's their issue.
Right. And that's the cautionary tale of the Buffalo Sabres that
Correct.
I'm referring to, right? It's like, we don't want 14 years of this, and
No.
we want there to be that step forward. And I think that it's, I think, an avoidable thing as far as the Flyers doing what the Sabres have done. And we have talked about taking additional risks in the draft. We have talked about, making sure that the core is supported, and all of these things that Buffalo hasn't been doing, but we just can't have the Flyers fall into the pit that is the Sabres method.
Right. I think about 80% of it's avoidable. There's always other factors. Sometimes there's bad luck. Something like Sean Couturier, that's bad luck, right? So sometimes there's that. Sometimes there's, the cut or go chase situation, whatever side you want to be on, but they lost that talent. And that's a loss of talent. And so when those things happen, it changes the plan. That's why the Flyers plan has changed 2 or 3 times already, as we've sort of outlined on the show. So is the Sabres, because, every couple of years they're realizing, what plan? This doesn't work, and it's like, and I think the Flyers are trying to avoid that, but there's a lot of factors. And so, like, you have to get a real handle on, and it's more than just what we see at the NHL club. It's a lot more than that.
It really is. But we'll see how these two teams in their current state face each other this weekend. We'll be back on Monday to talk about it, and continuing to talk about the fallout from the coaching change, as well as we got to play the Nashville Predators, also near them in the draft pecking order. Plus we'll have our we'll have our nemesis of the week, which there's so many candidates for that right now. As a reminder, we always want to hear from you. You can send in those mailbag questions or your thoughts on the coaching change via any of our socials at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail.com or comment on our YouTube channel. I'm Rachel. I'm on Twitter and Blue Sky at @rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology on those same socials, SPORTSOLOGY.
Thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen today. For your next listen, check out the Locked On NHL podcast. It brings you daily league-wide stories that matter with local coverage you love from Locked On. I'm on the show every Friday and Saturdays for the Women's Hockey Report. You can find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Have a great weekend, everyone.